That's perfect. And I'll just carry on and assume that everything's fine. And if it isn't, please let me know. The first thing is the question of the title, because when this was being talked about a month or two ago, we were thinking in terms of climate, economy, and this word faith, which I don't normally use very much, but I presume that means religion, deen, or something along those lines. And we have now got to the point where the title is the beginning of the end. And as has been expressed to me, this might sound a little bit negative. And so I want to just indicate that every cloud has a silver lining. So even if you took it as possibly sounding a little bit negative, don't think of it like that, because at the end of what I have to say, certainly, and I hope of what the others, one can actually see a positive way forward. And there are a number of people on the panel who will be able to indicate what that way forward is. So the first thing is to please take it as a positive opportunity, and if there's anything that sounds negative, just wipe it out of your head and put the word positive in place, so that we start off on a positive note. The other thing I wanted to mention right at the beginning, and perhaps this may be mentioned by Yasin later as well, is just to bear in mind the timing of this whole business, the timing of our talk, and the timing of the COVID epidemic. Is everybody still hearing me, by the way? Because there seems to be a frozen screen in front of me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Is that okay? Okay.
Yes.
Well, sorry, I'll continue and assume everything's fine then.
Yeah.
We have just exited the month of Rajab. I'm talking in Muslim terms, but from the Muslim point of view, this applies to all humanity and all the globe. And the characteristic of the month of Rajab is that it is opening the doors for change. So this virus has come in at a time of changing, of possible open doors for change. And then at the moment, we're in the month of Sha'ban after that. And the month of Sha'ban is the month, as people know, of the review of the whole year. So this is very much an opportunity. It's very much an opportunity for us to look back at what we've been doing and how we see ourselves and how we can correct what might be wrong and move forward onto what will be good for us. So it's an opportunity to review what we've been doing. And then we're coming up to Ramadan. And Ramadan, the month of fasting, is the month, as I've heard it said recently, basically of prize giving and reward. So it's where we've been correcting ourselves, and now we've got an opportunity to receive some benefit from what we've been doing, some big benefit, hopefully, from what we've been doing. Or it could be, again, using the words of someone that I've just been listening to recently, it could be a time for demotion. May it not be that. May it be a time for promotion for all of us. But it is a time where it might look a little bit difficult, but with difficulty comes ease. And as I said in the English expression, every cloud has a silver lining, and there's plenty of silver linings. So that's by way of short introduction. I wanted to start with two sayings from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first is that there is no time but that the one that comes after it is worse than it. Now that might sound negative, but it's just, if you like, a reality. One should not expect things to be, how can I say, there's no sort of evolutionary ease to the situation. The thing tends to get worse rather than get better. Language, behavior, etc., etc., etc. But at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ also said, if the day of rising comes and you are planting a palm tree, then keep planting it. In other words, we go on. We've chosen a path, and our task is to keep on that path and to keep at it on that path. Now, the other part of the title was for me to talk about politics and economics in some sort of loose way. I say loose way because I'm not going to go into lots of details. There's thousands of books have been published on both topics, and I'm not an expert on either. I'm not a political scientist, I'm not an economist, but there are certain things one can say for a general audience, which I hope will be of benefit. The first thing is that people get confused by the language of both politics and economics. So it almost becomes a sort of, you think, well, what can I understand from this? I don't really understand politics. I don't really understand these different parties. I hear Conservative, I hear Labour, I hear this, but in a sense, so what? And then on the other side, economics, people say, well, this is too complicated. All these figures, all of this, I don't understand all of these things. So I want to give some simple, I would hope, guidelines. The first thing is that one of my teachers said many years ago, if they talk to you economics, talk back to them politics. And the flip side is also the case. If they talk to you economics, talk back to them politics. Or if I've said it the wrong way around, if they talk to you X, talk back to them Y. And if they talk to you Y, talk back to them X. Because the reality of politics is the economic power behind it. And I wanted to go straight to a passage that I was told about many years ago by a man called Geoffrey Mark in a book called The Modern Idolatry, which was published in 1934. It has an emotional meaning for me, because this particular book was told, I was told about it by a man who has passed away very recently, Haj Abdul Halim Orr, rahimahullah. And he was a warrior against usury and a warrior against this financial system that we find ourselves enthralled in, chained in. And one of the simplest ways to undo the chains is to undo the chains of thinking. So that's why I want to mention this. This man, Geoffrey Mark, towards in the book, he says here, summarizing everything, of the absolute authority of finance today, there can be no question. This was 1934, but it's still absolutely true today. To those who still cling to an illusion that politicians, bishops, military authorities, judges and educators, or some combination of any 2, 3, 4, or all 5 of them, have the fate of nations and the world in their hands, it should be unnecessary to submit evidence to the contrary. Now, those 5 categories, they're the ones that we think are important in human society. Category number 1, politicians. We think they're somehow doing all these things for the benefit of their nations. Bishops, in other words, the religious authorities. Military authorities, in other words, as it says, military authorities. Judges, if we think the legal system is doing things for our benefit. Or educators, teachers, university academics, etc., or any combination of all these, then he says it should be unnecessary to submit evidence to the contrary. He summarizes, seeing that all things are produced through the agency of money, and that all money now comes into existence as a debt to the banking systems of the world, this simply means that our internationally organized moneylenders are the actual or potential owners of everything produced in the world. Short story being, the politics behind the economics, or should we say the economics behind the politics, more clearly in this case, is the reality of the banking fraternity. Now, there's a lot one could say about that, and this in a sense is not the place or we don't need to say anything. There's a lot more one could say, and if people are interested, one can go into more of this on another occasion perhaps. But the key point is that do not expect the politicians, I've got to be careful what I say here, because another thing I want to say is that you will find good judges, you will find good educators, you will find good politicians even, you will find good colonels and military authorities. It's possible, but the overriding power is that of the bankers or or financial authorities. Now, I know there's not that much time. I want to go straight to a second article I wanted to refer to, which is a much more recent one, 2014. Now, this in a sense says exactly the same thing. It's by two American academics, and they're looking at how American politics works. And the first paragraph of their article starts, who governs? Who really rules? To what extent is the broad body of US citizens sovereign? Now, when he says US citizens, you could substitute any nation for that. To what extent is the broad body of US citizens sovereign, semi-sovereign, or largely powerless? So he gives those three options. Sovereign, in other words, has power, semi-sovereign, partial power, or largely powerless, in other words, no power. And he summarizes, and I'm quoting from his abstract, and he says their analysis has indicated that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on US government policy, while average citizens and mass-based interest groups have little or no independent influence. Now that to me says something important, that do not expect the politicians to be able to do anything meaningful unless their masters think that it's okay. In other words, we say there's this corona business going on. Oh, the government should do this. We say, oh, there's a problem with the economics. The government should do this. We shouldn't expect the governments to do anything, nor should we expect them to be able to do anything. And that, in a sense, is the key point. Understanding our situation. Diagnosis is half the cure. That's why I've prefaced it with that little bit. It's a short snippet, and perhaps it might not, perhaps it'll mean something to some of you and not much to others. And as I said, there's a lot that can be fleshed out behind those simple statements. But very simply, diagnosis is half the cure. If we want to know where we are and where we can go, we have to know where we are now. So that's the point of doing that. The other thing is that the answer for today is, in a sense, the same answer as it's always been. Now, from the point of view of recognizing Allah, Allah is as He was. And the situation today is exactly the same as it's always been. And the position of the human being in the world is exactly the same as it's always been. And as one of the great scholars of the Muslim past said, the end of this community will not be put right by anything other than what put right the beginning of the community. In other words, we have to go back to the basic principles. And I would like to zoom in on, so excuse the pun for zooming in on something, but I would like to point out one particular easy thing that can be done. It isn't being done, but it can be done, and we can be the people who do it. And that is the question of zakat, as it's said in Arabic, alms giving, but it's an obligatory, I don't like using the word tax either because that's misleading, but it's, let's simplify things. Islam is based on 5 pillars, saying that there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Secondly, doing the prayer, in other words, worshipping. That's a key thing for our time as well. Let me just say before I forget, this is the first time since the reign of King John that people have been banned from going to the churches. Now, we also know that the Muslims have to close their mosques. So the thing that, in a sense, could be most useful for us to actually ask God to help us, to call on Allah and ask for help publicly with other people, we're effectively being banned from doing. Now, that is a key sickness in our situation and of our governors and these politicians that we're talking about. I mean, they're not the only people involved, as I've said before, but we have to try and get back to group worship. That's pillar number 2, to do the prayer in groups with other people. In other words, to ask Allah to ease the situation for us and everybody and show us the best way forward.
Sorry to interrupt, but just 5 minutes left, please.
I will finish off with the other 3 of the 5 pillars. So that's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 is zakat, which is an obligatory payment of a certain, if you have, I don't want to get tempted to get too technical, but let's just say that it's an alms giving, it's an obligatory alms payment if you have a certain minimum amount yourself that you keep for a year or more, then some of that should be taken and given to others. The question is, who should that be given to? And the best thing is the people who are nearest to you, the people that you know. What tends to happen nowadays is people send money abroad. Let's call that international payments. There are also national forums that are available. That's already on the right lines. But better than all of that is the personal, individual payments of, well, no, I've stepped slightly too far, because there should really be an authority that organizes these payments. In other words, one should be paying it to an authority. We don't have an authority, so we do the second best we can, is that we meet together, and those who are already doing this payment, we encourage them to do the payment and keep it local, keep it local, keep it local. So I'm going to briefly summarize, and excuse me for it being a little bit uneven. It is a time now, especially with this virus business, to look at oneself, to look at ourselves. And it is springtime. There's the concept in England, in English houses and English homes, of spring cleaning. So this is an opportunity for us to spring clean. I've just heard today that in Bombay, for example, it's been the first time that people can actually see the sun, because the smog has started disappearing. And likewise, we heard a few weeks back that in Italy, the water in Venice was actually clearing, where before it had been sort of muddy and you couldn't see through it. Now you can see through it. So these are the possibilities that Allah is giving us right now for us to spring clean ourselves, spring clean our community, spring clean our neighbors and our localities, and just work towards improving the situation, starting with ourselves outwards. And at that point, I'll end. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this stage, I've already sent a message to attendees if we've got time for a few questions. So if they can submit those questions via the Q&A feature. If you scroll the bottom of your browser, the screen, there should be a Q&A session that should appear, and we can take questions. So okay, first question we have is from an anonymous attendee. The question is, how do we reduce the power of the banks?
I'm glad you asked this, because in a sense, we shouldn't even expect to be able to do so. It's a massive situation, and we do not attempt the impossible. That's not our task. So we do what we can do and start with what we can do rather than what is supremely difficult. To change the whole system, especially to do it in a short space of time, it's not our business. Allah can do that if necessary. But understanding it, as I said, ourselves, we can be less affected by it. We can be less infected by it, using the language of what we're sort of being exposed to nowadays. And we can be like those people whose immunity is strong, and a virus comes in and it gets thrown out. A sneeze comes, you sneeze it out, alhamdulillah, you've got rid of something. So there's no answer that I have for that, but what I do say is that we can move from the forbidden usury to the obligatory payments of zakat, of charity. Yes, that's the word I was looking for earlier and forgot. The obligatory charity to help other people around us. And if there's different types of charity. There's the obligatory charity. There's also just charity, full stop. You feel like helping somebody. That's not a problem. You can help somebody anywhere in the world. You can help somebody right next to you. You can help somebody wherever you want. That's your business. The obligatory one should be done locally. And as I said, the banks, leave them to themselves, in a sense. I would say don't get involved. I see another one here, the 2014 paper by the American academics. The title is Testing Theories of American Politics, Elites, Interest Groups, and Average Citizens. And you can find it on the web. It's 2014 American Political Science Association. And it's by Martin Gillens, I think if it's pronounced that way, or Gilens, Martin Gillens, and Benjamin I. Page. So Gillens and Page, if that's the right pronunciation. Testing Theories of American Politics, Elites, Interest Groups, and Average Citizens. And it's very interesting. But you only have to read the beginning and the end. You don't have to worry about the middle of it.
This Professor Yasin, is a common question, one from another attendee. What is the best way to distribute zakat in the UK if you don't have any personal family friends who you feel could benefit?
I'll give you an answer in a few weeks' time. Because there's people I know who are busy with this matter right at the very moment, some of whom are attendees to this Zoom webinar, and they are working at finding ways of doing it. I think the thing is always, I mean, I don't even know the name, so I hesitate to say anything because I'd be saying the wrong thing, or I'd be in danger of saying the wrong thing. So please excuse me if I back off on that one, but there's the National Zakat something or other, I forget the name of it.
National Zakat Foundation.
Yes, they're a good start point.
Yeah.
And then one wants to find people that one's connected with in the community who are connected with them, etc. One needs to just build up links and make this a reality much as possible.
Right, there's lots of questions coming in. We have time only for just one more, which is Richard Goodall, this virus business. Was that a slip of the tongue? Like zooming in? Or?
Completely.
Okay, right. Okay, right. Thank you very much. There's lots of questions. Maybe we might have a chance at the end, at the Q&A, to address some of these. So sorry to those who we weren't able to get to your questions, but we do need to move on. So thank you very much to Professor Yasin. If I can give you a round of applause. I don't know how, it's just the panel.